And that's, and I don't want to go too far off, but you did. I'll temporarily put on my tinfoil hat here, just quickly, just quickly. You brought up the multiverse, and I can't help but think that that is such a wackadoodle kind of crazy bananas concept for people to just wrap their mind around. Like, it's just you're sitting in
You
a
can't wrap your mind around it,
you
but you
can't wrap
could.
your mind around it.
Yeah.
You're sitting in a McDonald's drive-through, and the last thing you're thinking about is a multiverse. It's just not
Yeah.
it doesn't tie in. And so that's why I can't help but think that that Marvel would make that such a huge part of their storyline moving forward. It's almost like saying, well, we have some proof that maybe this thing could be real. And so how are we going to convince the masses to kind of don this new belief system? Well, we'll just put it in with everything else that they're watching. It's guaranteed that they're watching Marvel. They're spending, billions of dollars per movie on this. Let's just kind of push this out through that and kind of make like a new pseudo religion through these fictional characters almost by putting in a little bit of that, that truth of showing the expanse and the potentiality of life, in that multiverse. And you're seeing other movies too. Another one was Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And there've been a couple that have kind of tied in with that theory as well, and only within what the past 5 years, 10 years. But it just seems kind of like it's going through. I don't know if it's a trend, but it seems like we're going through that kind of a phase like we did with the zombie movies, last
Yeah.
decade. It's just kind of all over the place. So maybe there is that incentive to push that belief into the collective, and the best way to do that is to put it right in front of where everyone's watching, and that's superhero movies.
No, I think that's right. And I'll say a few things on it. First, since you gave the shout out and promotion to McDonald's, I'll say
Oh yeah.
there's one time when everyone was going through the McDonald's drive-through and they were thinking about the multiverse, and that was in 2016, I believe, when Rick and Morty was pushing the Szechuan sauce for McDonald's, and
Yeah.
McDonald's lied about it. They
Yeah.
totally lied. They said we'd bring it out on this day and like have it available, and then they just didn't. And a bunch of people went to the McDonald's, including myself, wanting that Szechuan sauce because of Rick and Morty multiverse nonsense. And McDonald's just scammed a bunch of people into buying more food that day. So, anyways, shame on you, McDonald's,
Shame on you,
for
Golden
that.
Arches.
Uh, but
You're forever Kevin.
more seriously, I do think that the multiverse theory um, is an an odd emergence, and as we were pointing out, it's something that interests us, and yet we sort of it's so beyond us that we can't possibly comprehend uh, anything about it almost. Um, so I'll point out I'll point out two things. I guess so. The bad news is, and I think if you want to keep your tinfoil hat on, the reason you might say that it's being forwarded, I think, is the same reason that, or is for the same hope that the uh, uh, non-geocentric solar system and the size of the universe and galaxy, the effect that those had on our consciousnesses, I think the same thing is hoped for, and reasonably so, with the multiverse. So just as when we were displaced as the center of the solar system, that caused existential panic, essentially. And then as we further went down that road of seeing just how seemingly randomly we were put in the galaxy, and we're like all of that sort of coalesced into this nihilism, into the principle of mediocrity that we talked about before, of this basic assumption and this mythology that we are insignificant. And I think that the only real hope that anyone now analyzing the situation can look at the multiverse theory and come away with is that they would just be more of the same. That people looking at the multiverse theory would just have not only another, but just a superordinately large addition to that pile of how probably meaningless we are. We're just one of these manifestations within an infinite number of universes that are beyond our capacity. There's other versions of us that are, all these different things and whatnot. And so I think that this is a continuation of um, the same trajectory of mental processes that leads us down the nihilist pathway. I'll say it that way. And I think that most people would be it's just going to be common to look at the multiverse and to, you know, take that as another checkbox on the nihilist evidence category. So, so that being said, um, I want to point out, I think there are things in this book that can help, but hopefully another one that, I guess is connected to this book. But um, when people talk about multiverse, infinite universes, and really when they talk about the what do you call it, fine-tuned argument, and they dismiss it by the sense that, well, because we're in the universe that looks the way these things make it look, obviously we would be in the universe that has those things. Kind of a technical argument more than I made it sound, but I think these theories have a veneer of power to them. But the issue with both of them is that they tacitly assume infinity. So the multiverse theory is really easy. If you're assuming infinite universes, then you're assuming that infinity exists. So see chapter 1 of my book and go from there. Like, if infinity exists, there are things that follow from that, and ways to think about it. Obviously not everybody is going to immediately alight on the assumption that infinity is the infinity and is a unitary thing, but I think that it is, and I think that there are ways to come to that realization, and that changes things rather than just a continuing expanse of chaotic nonsense. And then, so same thing with the people who are like, well, our universe appears fine-tuned because it would have to. Their argument, sort of one step behind that, is, well, there was sort of all this potential for there was infinite potential for universes to come into being, infinite potential for creation, you might say. They're assuming sort of an infinite creative potential that was there in order for a universe to spring into being that had the proper parameters, that then we could look back and look, oh, that's weird. Those parameters are exactly what they would need to be for us to be here. Well, they say that's inevitable, but it's only inevitable if there's a infinite potential for creative power that's generating the creation of universes. So you're assuming infinity. There's the presumed and tacit assumption of an infinite creative potential that is there that would make that argument make sense. And based on how I've argued in this book and in my previous book, I think that the assumption of infinity, whether people are aware of it, whether they want to admit it or not, that's the same as the assumption of God. So as soon as you bring in infinity to make your system work, you've brought in God. It's one and the same thing.
That's interesting because I was actually gonna make that point too. It's like it's all about where you're attributing your meaning. So if, let's say, somebody provides you with the information that there's a vast universe and that you're not at the center of it, the Earth isn't at the center of it, you can either say like, oh wow, God is great, Or you could
Yeah,
say,
yeah, exactly.
or oh, I'm insignificant. And then it's I didn't even think about this till you brought it up. The further down that pit of despair when harboring the multiverse, it's like, wait a minute, not only are we a small speck in a vast universe, but there's an infinite number of universes. So you can also look at the multiverse theory and say like, oh, well, God is great.
Right.
Would say, wait a minute. You're telling me that there's an infinite number of me and that there's a version of me that's floating in a sea of cotton candy where it's raining marshmallows into my mouth while I'm slaving away at this 9 to 5 on a hamster wheel. So,
Yeah.
it's like it's like I can see how people could fall into that pit of despair when you think
Yes.
like that, but then that's when you don't have anything else to grasp onto. It's just that's when you're in that limited, like outside of my current reality, what I'm experiencing, even with this, it's all meaningless.